Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another how-to session. My name is Francois. It's awesome to welcome you to the webinar. And as everybody is entering the webinar, good afternoon. Awesome to see you all. Thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, quite some interesting circumstances I find myself in, but making it work. Technology is an extremely awesome thing. With that, I want to introduce my co-host today, and the man who's going to do a lot of the talking today is none other than Mr. Adam Owen. Many of you will know Adam already by now. So Adam, a warm welcome to this how-to session today.
Hey, Francois, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be back.
Great stuff. So today we are talking all about how to motivate your team. And I think this is such an apt time also to do it, because we now are like more than 18 months into this whole new way of working. And a lot of the teams, I was talking to somebody the other day saying that all these staff, none of them are basically at the office anymore, and they're working from 4 different towns and cities. So, you know, the way we collaborate, the way we work together has changed quite considerably. But we still need to be motivated. We still need to come together as a team. And also we need to understand what really drives the people that we have in our teams, and which things are, you know, really valuable and that really makes a difference long term versus something that is more of an expectation today than it is motivation. So that's really what we're going to talk about. Adam, before we sort of get started, anything you want to say just to position before we get going?
Yeah, certainly. I think for me, more than anything, this session, there are 3 key things that I want to draw out of it, really. And we'll use a couple of fairly well-known motivational models to do that. But sometimes it's not about huge amounts of content, and it's not about lots of different things. Sometimes it's just about doing the very, very basics really well. And to use these models to understand not just what's going on with the motivation of your team members, but also for yourself and for your clients. You know, these models work across all platforms. So we're going to focus on team members, but you know, we can apply it to so many different walks of life. And I'll bring in some examples from the last 20 months or so, just to sort of illustrate and to help us to not only understand what motivates people to do certain things, but also to be more understanding of them. Because once we understand people's motivations, we can hopefully just lower some of our judgments a little.
No, absolutely. And with that, let's get sort of into it. Just some of the outcomes. First, we are going to look at something called the Herzberg Model, which I'm quite, when I saw it for the first time, it was like, oh, this makes so much sense. And a lot of things became clearer based on that. And then obviously, you know, you can't really talk about these kind of things without talking about Maslow, but also how we apply that. And then just understanding how these things, I think, play together, and how to interpret, and obviously how does it influence motivation. So that's really what we're looking to get out of today. Please, I want to invite you all to ask questions in the chat or the Q&A. If you are putting it in the chat, not in the Q&A, please just put a capital Q, so it's easy for us to spot and see which ones are questions and which ones are not. And Adam, with that, over to you to get going with today's session.
Thank you, Francois. So, yeah, Francois, you've mentioned that we're going to start with the Herzberg model. And the Herzberg model is a 2-factor theory model. If we can have the slide up there, then we'll pop that up. And just there it is. Yes, thank you. And this model itself is, when you first look at it, it's relatively complicated and relatively straightforward all at the same time. But this one talks about 2 key elements in terms of what moves us forward. And people can be away from motivated and toward motivated. I'm sure many of you will have heard this in the past. Francois, let me ask you, do you think a away from motivated person or a toward motivated person? Are you driven by achieving goals, or are you driven more by the pain of not achieving something? Do you leave things to the last minute of a deadline, or do you like to get things done way in advance? How does it work for you?
I'm more of a close to the deadline guy, Adam. I wish I wasn't, but that, you know, sort of the necessity and things have to happen now. That's more what drives me than, you know, doing things way in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very similar. I'm very much an away from motivated person. So, the snooze button on my alarm is very much my friend, but I'll set my alarm way early so that I actually get the feeling of being able to snooze a little as well, which of course is, in many ways entirely illogical. But understanding what motivates you and how you're motivated, you can then harness that. And you can structure your life and you can bring structure to it, even if we're not always chasing goals. And so it's really important to begin to just understand yourself as well in this. But the Herzberg model really looks at two factors. There are the things that motivate us, and Herzberg obviously clearly called those motivators. And then there are the things that the absence of them causes us to be dissatisfied or to lack motivation. But the provision of this second set of factors, what Herzberg called hygiene factors, then the provision of hygiene factors doesn't actually motivate you. So if you are getting all of your hygiene factors from your employer or from the organization or just in life generally, then it brings you back to zero. You're neither motivated nor demotivated. But the application of a hygiene factor doesn't actually drive you forward in your motivation. Only the motivators, according to Herzberg, actually drive you forward and have you feeling more motivated with the application of them. And this is a really interesting dynamic, because you'll have noticed, and you may have even done this yourself, that oftentimes we'll confuse hygiene factors with motivators. And we'll think that providing what is essentially a hygiene factor to somebody is something that will cause them to be more motivated. And if we look at the list of hygiene factors, then in there are things like job security, rate of pay, company policies, the relationship that they have with other people, the benefits that they receive. But it can also go down to the granular operational level. It can be things like whether or not you have a comfortable desk and a chair and a place to work with lighting and heating and windows that close and doors that open and shut properly and lifts that work. And something that I've seen in so many organizations, enough toilets to satisfy the number of people. I was working with a very large organization of 3,000 people, and their biggest complaint from their team was that they didn't have enough toilets. And so people spent time queuing to use the facilities. Now that in itself is the most obvious example of literally a hygiene factor. And the organization hadn't satisfied this core need. Did it? The provision of additional facilities would not have actually motivated the team anymore. But what it would have done, it would have stopped them being dissatisfied with coming to work. So, Francois, you mentioned your circumstances at the moment aren't your normal, it's not your normal setup. Just talk me through some of the hygiene factors you're missing right now then, because just before we came on air, you were telling me that there are one or two things that you don't normally have that are missing.
Yeah, Adam, it's so I'm obviously not in my studio right now. And yeah, I don't have the normal amount of screens with me. I don't have my proper microphone. I don't have my normal setup where I know where everything is and all of that. So counting a lot on technology to make this work for me today. But yeah, it's just I've usually got a standing setup. I'm sitting at the moment. So these are all things that sort of a little bit, makes me uncomfortable. I'm not as comfortable as I usually am. But those are some of the things I'm missing for this session.
Exactly, and that's exactly what happens. We feel less comfortable than we normally do. Now, once everything's resolved and you're back to your normal studio setup, then ultimately you will feel comfortable. But it won't cause a huge surge in motivation. It will just bring you back to level, and you'll be at that level where you feel comfortable operating. And oftentimes I'll see this in organizations. How often have we seen an organization where the IT, the hardware that people are using, their laptops or their desk-based computers, are getting so old that they're almost not functioning? And I once was working with an organization who had this situation. And there was a big debate at board level about when the new IT would arrive. And they planned this new IT, and it took longer than it was expected. But there came the morning where everybody in the business got new laptops. And the operations director arrived at the business and started handing out laptops like he was Santa Claus on Christmas Day. And And he was expecting everybody to be grateful. He was expecting everybody to be happy. He was expecting everybody to see it as if it was a gift, and that they would be much more highly motivated following this big morning. 10 a.m. he went round, he handed everybody their new IT. And he was really disappointed. And what had disappointed him was that everybody simply shrugged. Their reaction was, meh. It was one of, well, it's about time. We've needed this for a long time. And so it brought people on our diagram here back to zero, but it didn't cause a surge in their motivation. And he had spent thousands and thousands on this, and he was so devastated that it hadn't, so everyone weren't applauding him. And we had a little chat, and I explained to him this model. I said, look, this was always likely to be the case, because what we're doing is we're satisfying hygiene factors. And he pondered a little while. He said, well, what do I need to do to motivate the team then? I said, well, we need to recognize what they're doing. We need to give them a sense of achievement. We need to give them more responsibility now that they've got this new kit. We need to give them projects, and we need to give them opportunity. We need to do all of the things that are about personal growth and job satisfaction, to give them interest in what they're doing. And that is how we begin to motivate your team, now that you've satisfied the hygiene factors. And he said, can I not just give them a pay rise and a bonus? And that was the really interesting and most telling part of all of this. Because oftentimes people think that money is a motivator. And, well, Francois, let me ask you, do you see money as being a motivator?
No, it's never been. I've had that discussion with my wife quite a few times. Unfortunately, I would love to do some things for free, or what I do, if I could do that for free, I would have. But it's no amount of money is going to move me to do the things that I don't like doing. So it's definitely not a motivator. I guess every now and so often the lack of money can be a motivator, but the prospect of a lot more money isn't necessarily the thing that moves me personally.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the case. That in terms of this model, this is what this model tells us. You'll note that benefits and rate of pay are actually in the hygiene factors. Now, there is an important distinction here, and we'll look at it when we move to the Maslow model in a few minutes. That actually there is a level of earnings that people need to feel comfortable, and therefore they will be motivated to achieve that level of earnings to reach comfort. But there's a lot of research, particularly coming from Scandinavia, looking at happiness and well-being, that once you reach a certain level of income, and it's not an astronomical level of income, but once you reach a certain level of income, that actually money is no longer a motivator. It doesn't make you any happier. You don't feel any great benefit beyond that level of comfort. And so if we take that and think about how can we test that? And what I'd ask everybody on the call to think about is, if you're self-employed now, then it may not apply to you in this same way today. But anyone who's ever been employed, think about payday, when payday came around. And usually for a lot of people, that's sort of the 28th of the month. On payday, if money was a motivator, you would expect everybody in the team to feel a surge of motivation. That actually they would think, oh, I've been paid today, I'm feeling much more motivated. And actually, people don't, do they? But then consider the alternative. Consider that actually if you pay your people late, think about not paying them on the 28th, but it being the 1st of the following month, or even the 2nd, or by the 3rd, they've still not been paid. How do they feel then? They feel dissatisfied, demotivated, stressed, annoyed, angry, because you've broken the contract. And so that points us more and more to this idea that money and financial reward is a hygiene factor, not a motivator for your teams, unless it's recognition. If you pay somebody a bonus to recognize the work that they've done, and if you talk about it amongst the team, if you allow them to tell the people that they've been paid a bonus as recognition for what they've done, then that recognition is still a motivating factor. So it can be part of the motivation, but it is unlikely to be all of the motivation. It's far more likely that the absence of a decent rate of pay is demotivating, rather than the achievement of a decent rate of pay won't motivate you any further. But I think that Francois, is a really good time to start moving on and thinking about this second model, because these two models sort of interplay together, and we can look at how we motivate our teams through this the famous pyramid. Is this something that you've seen before?
Yeah. No, I think Maslow, you learn anything in economics or anything like that, or even in financial planning, one of the first things is to understand these things. But I think knowing the model from a theoretical point of view and being able to apply it to different situations, I guess is where, so how do you bring those two together? For me, sometimes, it's not a natural thing. I need to think about this quite hard.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And oftentimes we sort of stop a little bit too early with Maslow's model of motivation and how it works with people, because we recognize that there are 5 levels. Most people aren't quite sure what self-actualization really means, do we? It's just this amorphous thing at the top of the pyramid. And to be fair, most people operate in the first 4 layers anyway of the pyramid. But Maslow's theory goes, and there was now an additional layer that has been added later as well, but Maslow's theory goes that you have to have achieved satisfaction to a level of at least 80% at each level before you'll begin to turn to the next level. And that's where we often stop in our understanding of this. But actually, we can take it to just one more step and really begin to understand how people are interacting, how they're operating, and how we can think about motivating them further. And this, for me, is where this becomes really interesting and quite powerful as well, for something that you can look at day in, day out, and begin to assess where your team members are, but also where your clients are and where people in society are generally. Let's just walk through the layers briefly then. The physiological layer, that is food and shelter. The safety layer, for most of us who are working in financial services and financial planning, we'd hope that the safety layer is really about job security. The expectation that your company, if you're self-employed and running a company, or if you're a shareholding director or anything like that, that your company actually is sustainable. That's safety. We're not threatened on a day-to-day basis for income. If we're employed, then we're not being threatened with redundancy. Love and belonging is about being part of a team, being part of a group, being part of a family, if that is where you get your love and belonging, but it's being part of something that is broader and more social. Esteem is about being recognized, feeling good about yourself, being allowed to feel good about yourself, and for that to be okay. Oftentimes we seek esteem now in social media. We go for likes, which is very short-lived and quite a dangerous thing to ask strangers to build your esteem. To rely on the provision of likes from strangers as to whether or not you achieve esteem is something that is definitely a dangerous place to be. And it can put your self-esteem on the floor if you're not getting those likes, if that is the only way you can access them. But you can see from this model where social media really does begin to come into play in the love, belonging, esteem place. Self-actualization is the ability to be able to do things beyond self. It's about thinking about others, not for any sort of motive in terms of esteem or building your own needs. It's about just simply being there and achieving things that don't support any of the other parts of the pyramid. And this is then where it gets interesting in terms of how we can use it. Because if you think about yourself, anybody here right now, then think about where you are on the pyramid. Have you achieved physiological? Are you at least 80% satisfied in that area? Do you have food, shelter, all of that? Have you achieved safety? Is your job secure? Is your business secure? Then do you feel part of a team or a wider group or an organization? Your esteem needs being met. If you've achieved love, belonging, etc., are you being recognized? Do people pay you compliments? Do people praise you for the great work that you do? And then are you able to step beyond that? Are you able to do things not for recognition, but just because it's a great thing to do, just to exist on a plane of completely different consciousness almost? Now, at each level, wherever you are, then you won't be able to move on and start achieving other things according to this model unless you have satisfied the model that you are stalled at, or the part of the model that you are stalled at. And a great example of this is what happened during the first lockdown here in the UK, but I imagine that this played out around the world as well in all these various lockdowns for the coronavirus pandemic. And we can look at how groups and large numbers of people behaved. Now, I don't know if you've had a similar thing in South Africa, but in the UK, when we first realised that lockdown was coming along, Francois, a lot of people decided that actually one thing to do would be to stockpile. We had this phenomenon of panic buying. One of the very first things to go were toilet rolls. Did you have the great toilet roll panic?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Did you yourself go out and buy extra toilet rolls, may I ask?
Well, we ordered them. I didn't go out, but we did order a few. I think once we started seeing things flying off the shelf, and because I was like, no man, we'll always get, and then you start seeing there's nothing in the shops, and then you start getting like, and then you also start stockpiling.
Yeah, I'm quite a prepper. I like to be prepared. I like to think forward. And actually, it must have been maybe early January of 2020, I actually read an article about Hong Kong, because of course the pandemic hit Hong Kong before it hit the UK. And the article was about some people who've been arrested for actually an armed robbery of a toilet roll warehouse. And that got me thinking. I was thinking, gosh, this is something that we haven't seen before. You know, people armed robberying a toilet roll warehouse. This is probably quite serious, because what it said to me is that people are very worried about their physiological needs. You know, if somebody thinks there's money to be made in having a massive stockpile of toilet rolls that they can sell on the grey market, then there must be something quite significant in this. And so we can be quite judgmental of people who stockpile and panic buy at events like that. But what we're really saying is that they are simply looking after their physiological needs. And people will leave work early and head to a supermarket or Costco or wherever it might be and fill a massive trolley full of things. And then once they've got everything and it's all there, they relax and they return back to the next stage of Maslow's pyramid. So once people satisfied their physiological needs and they had their own personal stockpile, the next thing they thought about was safety. What if this thing, locks everything down and I can't work? What if I don't get paid? What if my business suffers? And at that stage, you can't think of anything else until such times as you've satisfied that. Now, here in the UK government acted relatively quickly, in all fairness. They created the furlough scheme, and they said that people who are employed, they will receive 80% of their income for the time at which we are in lockdown. And at that point, people who were employed at least began to relax more. It's like, oh, okay, I've got my toilet rolls and my stockpile, for those who did. The government have said that my income is going to be okay. It's not going to be brilliant, but it's going to be okay. Right, I'm in lockdown now. I'm sat at home. I can't go anywhere. And we went into a very hard lockdown very quickly. It was literally do not leave the house. And so what were people then searching for? Well, at that point, once those lower two levels were satisfied, they could think about love and belonging. But of course, they were in lockdown. So we all got on Zoom. The number of Zoom pub quizzes, trivia quizzes, family get-togethers, all of those things just exploded exponentially because people seek out love and belonging. Now, in our profession, we work as part of teams, etc., but we were suddenly siloed, and that was something that organizations needed to fix quite quickly. Once we got to there and we were beginning to feel satisfied that yes, we could operate as part of a team, we could still chat. You and I met over Zoom, didn't we, Francois, and became great friends. And so we fulfilled some of our love and belonging in that sense. But then what happened in our profession? Now, our profession, in financial planning, absolutely loves an awards ceremony, don't we? But none of us were able to go to awards ceremony. So what did we start doing? We ran one, Francois, if you recall. We ran an awards ceremony online because people needed to be recognized. They needed to be motivated towards esteem. So all of these things in these first four layers played out very obviously on mass basis across that entire global population of all the things that Maslow states, that we need to satisfy these things, but very specifically, we need to satisfy them in order. At the very, very beginning of us talking about being locked down at 2020 and our government starting to talk about that, we didn't see people thinking, I must get a Zoom account and start running a pub quiz every week or a trivia quiz, because actually they were still out there buying toilet rolls. and huge amounts of coffee and tins of beans. We didn't see people thinking about awards ceremonies whilst their businesses might be crumbling or their job security was threatened. And this is what the model tells us. When you're threatened at a certain level, you completely forget everything else and focus on that. If you have a situation in an organization where that organization is under threat of some redundancies, you'll find teamwork break down very rapidly because of this. But then think what it means to our clients. Think about our financial planning with our clients. We love to get our clients to building esteem and self-actualization. We love to find clients who are there to do those great deeds in the world and be philanthropists. But if we haven't underpinned our clients' financial planning with the structure to protect their physiological needs and their safety needs, if they don't have the right levels of protection product in place, life assurance, if they don't have the right level of trust work in place or other structures dependent on the territory that mean that people's beneficiaries are protected in the event of something happening, then if they get ill, they'll very quickly forget about their philanthropy and their other works at the top end of the pyramid, and they'll be focusing entirely at the rest. And our job as financial planners for our clients, I think, is to ensure that we understand what motivates people, what works in this pyramid, and just how this pyramid is going to be useful to them. So as we draw to a close, it's probably worth me summarizing a little, Francois. What do you think in terms of what do we take out of this half hour of me rambling on about these two models?
Yeah, because I have a couple of questions that I want to ask about. If you think about, just if I may quickly, just with Maslow, it's in order, right? So you go up and you go down, but you can't jump from right at the top right down to safety or physiological if that's the circumstances, and then build yourself up through that again. But if I go back to Herzberg's model, then I want to know, are these things also in order of its importance, or you also graduate, or is this just like these are a list of things that are really motivational factors, and these are the hygiene factors, but not in order of importance or in order that we seek to fulfill those things?
Yeah, these are simply a list of some examples of hygiene factors and some examples of motivators. Whether or not your chair is comfortable will be the single most focus of one of your team members if they have an uncomfortable chair. They won't notice if you fix their chair or if you provide them with a comfortable chair when they arrive. If you've got a new team member starting and they sit down at a comfortable desk and a comfortable chair, they will not notice. But if their chair is uncomfortable and continues to be so, then they will be gradually more and more demotivated. And that's the thing to learn, is that hygiene factors and motivators, there are so many different nuances in them. Think about recognition. How many different ways can we recognize somebody's achievements? We can thank them publicly in front of everybody. We can send a team email thanking them. We can give them a pay rise. We can give them a parking space. We can send them some flowers. There's a million ways in which we can do it. But ultimately, it's about understanding that recognition motivates somebody. Giving them more responsibility motivates people. If you're one of these control freaks who hold everything yourself and then can't let go and delegate, then you're actually not helping your team to feel motivated. Because being part of something, having that responsibility, having the opportunity to show what they can do really motivates people, way more than paying them a little bit extra every year. And you mentioned the Maslow model and the fact that we have to be, we have to fulfill the need. I had a team member at one point who I was honestly struggling to understand the motivation for this person in terms of how they were motivated. They would arrive just about on time, they'd leave just about on time, and they do just about enough to get by. But they were really capable, and I couldn't understand what it was that was causing them to be blocked in their motivation of doing more. And it was only when I realized that they actually had an outside interest, and their outside interest was a really big thing that they did on a voluntary basis. They interacted with thousands of people. They raised money for charity. They helped these people travel all over the world. They were following a sports team, in actual fact, but this person was somebody who really did a great deal of work in that. And so all of their love, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization needs were being met out of work. Work was simply a function to satisfy safety and physiological needs. And once I'd got my head around that, my next task was, right, how do I bring this person in to get some of their love and belonging needs in here in the business. And what we ended up doing, and it was quite a random thing, but it did come about. There's a long story that I won't, we've run out of time to tell you, but we ended up forming a house band because this person also had an interest in music and got him really interested in being part of that team. And that team was obviously formed of the team that he worked within. And all of a sudden we found far more contribution within the business because actually we had that sense of belonging. And so you can get your motivation elsewhere, and you can find that you satisfy these needs outside of work. So for some of your team, their motivation will be coming from something else outside of work. Your job is to make work as exciting and interesting, or at least to fulfill that particular level where they are stalled within your business.
Yeah, awesome. Right, Adam, let's do a quick summary as we are out of time. I want to ask everyone to sort of maybe what has stood out for you today. Is there anything in particular that you thought like, well, you know, that's something I need to consider with my team going forward, or even for yourself? If you can put that in the chat, that'll be quite cool. But Adam, yeah, let's do a quick summary, just bring everything together.
Absolutely, Francois. Three things. There are three things that you can focus on that will absolutely help you to nail the motivation of your team. First of all, get all of the hygiene factors right. That's the big one. Remember that money is a hygiene factor rather than a motivator. So you can throw as much money as you like at the problem, it won't fix it. So think about getting all the hygiene factors right. Second one is to then give up some things yourself so that you can give your team the gift of being enabled to be motivated. This is in our Herzberg model. Think about Christmas. At Christmas, when we give gifts, then the biggest joy is giving a gift to someone else. Think about your delegation, and when you delegate tasks to somebody, is exactly that. You are giving them the gift of being able to demonstrate their worth. That is huge for people in terms of their motivation. So let go of more things. And then when we think of Maslow, identify where somebody is stalled. Work on fixing that level, and then they will have the headspace to move on to the next. Those three things will really help you motivate your team.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Guys, so yeah, if there are any questions, we can quickly answer a couple of questions if you have any questions. So Charles is asking, will the recording be available? Absolutely. So I am just going to edit the beginning and the end, and then we'll put it up on the Propulsion Learning YouTube channel, and it will be available there. So you're welcome to go watch it. We will also include the link in the thank you emails that will go out for everybody that attended. So you can also find it there tomorrow this time. But yeah, otherwise just keep an eye on the YouTube channel for that. So it should be on there by tonight. So that's good. Kova said nothing like Maslow's hierarchy. Absolutely. And also Kuvendra said that how the hygiene factors affects teams it was interesting to him. And yeah, other than that, not much. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining Adam and myself. We really appreciate it. It's always great spending some time with you and just sharing some of our thoughts and I don't know, knowledge, experience, and just sort of challenge some thinking. I think that's what it's all about. We want to invite you to come and check out PROpulsion Pro as well. Please come and look at that, propulsion.co.za/pro. And if you're interested, become part of the community and join us because we do lots more in there. Anyway, Adam, from my side, thank you very, very much for joining me today at this lunchtime for me. It's almost lunchtime for you. I think you're getting close. Mid-morning teas, maybe more like it. But thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Francois, and great to see everybody. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Everyone, have a fantastic day. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.